Welcome to episode 11 of Rise of a Nation. This episode is on Panama.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to Panama for a fascinating journey through their history.
It's a story full of twists and turns, you know?
Yeah, so we're going to go chronologically using their Wikipedia article as a guide.
Okay, sounds good.
So are you ready to uncover just how much there is to discover about Panama?
I'm ready.
All right, so I want to ask you a question before we dive into the history.
Okay.
Where do you think Panama declared its first independence from?
Oh, from Spain, right?
Well, that's what most people would think, but you're going to have to wait to find out the real answer.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
And get this, before the Europeans even arrived, there were impressive pre-Columbian civilizations in Panama.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I know, right? Unfortunately, they've been overlooked compared to their more famous neighbors.
That's a shame.
Yeah, and I think it's because of this Western-centric view of civilization that we have.
Oh, I see. Yeah, it definitely leads to less research in some areas.
Exactly. But there's definitely evidence that there were advanced societies there, like platform mounds, paved roads, even jade and gold artifacts.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
Yeah, it really paints a picture of a sophisticated society.
For sure.
So let's jump ahead to the 16th century, 1513 to be exact.
Okay.
This is when Vasco Núñez de Balboa, a Spanish explorer,
Right?
becomes the first European to see the Pacific Ocean.
After crossing the Isthmus of Panama.
Yeah. Can you imagine that?
It must have been amazing.
I know. And of course, this discovery changes everything. It opens up this new route to the east. And Panama quickly becomes this vital link in the Spanish Empire's trade network.
You know, talking about trade routes and global commerce, Panama's story is fascinating.
Oh, totally. And speaking of trade, what do you think comes next?
Well, if Panama's a vital link in the trade network, they probably needed to establish a major city, right?
Exactly. In 1519, Panama City is founded strategically located on the Pacific coast,
Makes sense.
and it becomes a crucial port city for the Spanish.
I can just imagine the galleons laden with silver and gold from Peru docking in Panama City and then transporting it all across the isthmus to Spain.
It's pretty wild to think about.
Yeah, it really is.
But of course, this kind of wealth and strategic importance attracts attention.
Oh,
Yeah, you know what's coming, right?
pirates. Oh, no.
In 1671, Henry Morgan, this notorious Welsh privateer, sets his sights on Panama City.
I've heard of him. Wasn't he pretty ruthless?
Oh, yeah, he was.
So what happened?
Well, he and his buccaneers launched this surprise attack and basically destroy Panama City.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it forces the Spanish to relocate the city a few kilometers west.
That's crazy to think about.
I know, and the ruins of the old city, known as Panama Viejo, are now a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
Oh, wow. So you can still see the remnants of that attack.
Yep, it's a reminder of Panama's sometimes violent past.
That's really interesting.
So Panama endures this attack, and life under Spanish rule continues, but we know that the Spanish grip on their colonies eventually weakens. And by the late 18th and early 19th centuries, there's this wave of revolutions sweeping across Latin America.
Makes sense people were ready for independence.
Exactly. They were inspired by the Enlightenment and fueled by resentment towards colonial rule.
So Panama joins this movement.
They do. In 1821, Panama finally breaks free from Spanish control.
That's awesome.
It is. But here's where it gets interesting. Instead of becoming their own independent nation, they decide to join a larger entity.
Really? Why would they do that?
Well, they chose to become part of Gran Colombia.
Gran Colombia.
Yeah, it was a short-lived but very ambitious republic led by Simón Bolívar.
Oh, Simón Bolivar. That's a name that echoes through history.
I know, right?
Mm.
He wanted to unite much of South America under one banner.
What a grand vision.
I know. But it's interesting that Panama, having just gained independence, would choose to become part of this.
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't they be worried about losing their autonomy?
Well, some Panamanians were, especially those in the interior regions.
It makes sense.
But others, particularly the elite in Panama City, saw the potential benefits of being part of a larger, more powerful nation.
Oh, I see. So they thought it would offer them more security and maybe economic opportunities.
Exactly. Plus, Panama's location connecting North and South America made it crucial to Bolívar's vision.
So Panama finds itself at a crossroads again.
Exactly. Joining Gran Colombia offered both promise and potential problems.
And I'm guessing this decision leads to a very complex relationship with Colombia.
You got it. And that's what we'll be talking about next time.
Sounds good. I'm ready to hear more.
All right, we'll see you then. Last time we were talking about how Panama had joined this grand vision of Gran Colombia.
Yeah, led by Simón Bolivar.
Right. But as we know, Gran Colombia, despite Bolivar's best efforts, didn't last.
It's true. There were just too many internal divisions and regional tensions.
Yeah, different regions had different priorities. It was really hard to keep such a vast and diverse territory together.
Yeah, makes sense.
So by 1830, Gran Colombia dissolves and fractures into the nations we know today: Venezuela, Ecuador, and Colombia.
So what happens to Panama during all of this?
Well, Panama ends up back under the authority of Colombia.
Oh, so they come full circle.
They do, but it's not exactly a happy reunion.
Right, because there were already those tensions about losing autonomy.
Exactly, and over the next few decades, those tensions only grow stronger.
So even though they're back with Colombia, that desire for self-determination, it doesn't go away.
Not at all. In fact, Panama makes several attempts to break free.
Oh, really? Like what?
In 1830, General José Domingo Espinar leads a rebellion.
Who's that?
He was a prominent figure in Panama, and he's hoping to convince Bolivar to take direct control of Panama.
Oh, interesting. So kind of bypass Colombia.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But Bolivar at this point is already dealing with the collapse of his republic.
Oh, right. That makes sense.
So he declines and urges Panama to remain part of Colombia.
So that attempt fails, but I'm guessing Panama doesn't give up that easily?
Just a year later, in 1831, another rebellion erupts.
Wow, they didn't waste any time.
Nope. This time, it's led by General Juan Eligio Alzuru.
Another general.
Yep. Seems like military leaders were at the forefront of these independence movements.
Makes sense.
Anyway, Alzuru manages to seize control of Panama City for a short time.
Really?
Yeah, and he even declares Panama's independence.
So close.
I know. But sadly, this rebellion is quickly crushed, and Alzuru is executed.
Oh, that's awful.
It really shows how determined the Panamanians were to govern themselves.
And how much was at stake?
Exactly. Then, in 1840, another opportunity arises.
Oh, so they try again.
They do. Colombia, at this point, is in the middle of a civil war.
So their government's weakened and distracted.
Exactly perfect timing for Panama to make another move.
So they declare independence again.
They do, and this time they actually establish what's called the Free State of the Isthmus.
The Free State of the Isthmus.
Yep, it's an independent state with their own constitution and elected government.
Wow, so they're really making progress.
They are. They even established diplomatic ties with other nations.
So it seems like they've finally achieved their goal.
It does, but sadly the Free State doesn't last.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it manages to hold on for 13 months, but then it rejoins Colombia in late 1841.
Oh, what happened?
Well, it's a mix of things: internal divisions, pressure from Colombia, and a lack of international support.
I see. So another setback for Panama.
It is, but this attempt, even though it failed, has a lasting impact.
How so?
The Free State of the Isthmus becomes a symbol of Panamanian aspirations.
Right. It shows they were capable of governing themselves.
Exactly. It keeps that flame of independence burning.
Okay, so we're now in the mid-19th century. Panama is still part of Colombia, but their desire for independence is strong.
Right. So what finally leads to their break with Colombia? I think we both know the answer.
Panama Canal.
The Panama Canal becomes the catalyst for Panama's ultimate independence.
Of course.
By the late 19th century, the idea of a canal across the Isthmus of Panama is gaining serious momentum.
Right. I mean, the potential for global trade was huge.
Enormous, a canal would slash travel times between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, revolutionize shipping, and transform global commerce. I know you're fascinated by trade routes and logistics.
Oh, absolutely. This period would have been incredible to witness.
I know, right? But as you probably know, the French were actually the first to try and build the canal.
Yeah, that's right. In the 1880s, a French company led by Ferdinand de Lesseps, the guy behind the Suez Canal, tries to build it.
But it doesn't go well.
No, they faced huge challenges, disease engineering problems, and financial setbacks.
Yeah, the project ends up collapsing and leaves behind a lot of debt and broken dreams.
So the French dream ends, but the idea of a Panama Canal doesn't go away.
And that's where the United States enters the picture.
Makes sense. They saw the strategic and economic importance of the canal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they were determined to succeed where the French failed.
But there was a problem. Panama was still part of Colombia.
And Colombia was hesitant to give the U.S. the control they wanted over the canal project.
So we have Colombia reluctant, the U.S. eager, and Panama still wanting their independence.
This is where things get really interesting.
So what happens? Does the U.S. just step in?
Well, they start subtly supporting Panamanian separatist movements.
Oh, smart. They knew an independent Panama would be more willing to grant them concessions for the canal.
Exactly. It's a real geopolitical power play.
It sounds like it. So what happens next?
Well, in 1903, things come to a head. Panama, with U.S. backing, declares independence from Colombia.
Wow, so they finally do it.
They do. And there are even U.S. warships stationed off the coast of Panama to prevent Colombia from intervening.
So the U.S. is directly involved.
Oh, yeah, it's a very controversial move, one that's still debated by historians today.
I can imagine. I mean, for Colombia, it must have felt like a betrayal.
Absolutely. They lost a vital piece of land, and it was basically orchestrated by a foreign power.
So what happens after Panama declares independence?
When we left off, Panama had just achieved independence, and the Panama Canal was under construction, but it came at a price. Panama's newfound freedom was intertwined with U.S. control over this crucial waterway.
Right. And you know that canal zone, that 10-mile wide strip under U.S. control, it became this constant source of tension.
That makes sense. Panamanians saw it as a foreign entity right in their own country.
Exactly. It was this daily reminder that their sovereignty was limited. And there were protests and riots periodically, often fueled by resentment over the economic inequality.
Oh, so you mean the disparity between the economic benefits that U.S. citizens enjoyed in the zone compared to what was available to many Panamanians?
Yeah, exactly that.
So how did Panama eventually gain full control of the canal?
Well, it was a long and difficult process, and a key figure in that process was Omar Torrijos.
Omar Torrijos.
Yeah, he came to power in 1968 through a military coup, and he made it his mission to secure Panamanian sovereignty over the canal.
I have to admit I don't know that much about him. What kind of leader was he?
He was a complex figure, a populist leader with a strong nationalist streak. He really understood that the canal rightfully belonged to Panama. He was also a skilled negotiator and managed to rally international support for his cause. Yeah, and he was really clever about leveraging the changing political climate in the United States to his advantage.
What do you mean by that?
Well, by the 1970s, the Vietnam War had soured many Americans on the idea of military intervention abroad.
Right.
And President Jimmy Carter, who took office in 1977, he was committed to promoting human rights and decolonization. Torrijos saw an opportunity in Carter's idealism.
So these two leaders, Torrijos and Carter, they find common ground on the issue of the Panama Canal.
They do. After years of intense negotiations, they signed the Torrijos-Carter treaties in 1977. And those treaties set in motion the process for the complete handover of the Panama Canal to Panama by the year 2000.
Wow, what a moment for Panama.
It was a huge celebration across the country.
I can imagine. After decades of struggle, they finally achieved their goal.
Yeah, it really was a defining moment in their history.
But I'm guessing not everyone was happy about it.
You're right. The treaties weren't without their critics, especially in the United States. Many people, particularly on the political right, saw it as a sign of weakness, like the U.S. was surrendering a vital strategic asset.
That makes sense. There must have been some intense debates in Congress.
Oh, absolutely. There were even attempts to block the ratification of the treaties, but ultimately they passed.
And that paved the way for Panama to finally take control of the canal.
Exactly.
So on December 31st, 1999, the Panama Canal, along with the surrounding canal zone, was officially transferred back to Panama.
It was incredibly symbolic. Not only did it represent the culmination of a long fight for sovereignty, but it also really solidified Panama's place in the world.
Yeah, the canal went from a symbol of foreign control to a source of national pride.
Exactly.
It's truly an inspiring story. It shows that even a small nation can achieve its goals with persistence and smart diplomacy.
I agree.
But our deep dive into Panama isn't over yet. We also need to talk about Panama's relationship with its neighbors.
Right.
So what about those borders, specifically the ones shared with Colombia and Costa Rica?
Well, let's start with the Darien Gap. It's this dense, roadless jungle that runs along the border between Panama and Colombia.
The Darien Gap. It's one of the few places where the Pan American Highway is interrupted.
Yeah, it's a fascinating region, almost a world unto itself, home to indigenous communities and incredible biodiversity.
It sounds amazing.
It is, but unfortunately, it's also a haven for drug trafficking and other illicit activities.
That makes sense. It must be hard to control such a dense and remote area.
It definitely presents challenges. The Darien Gap makes it very difficult to manage the flow of people and goods across the border.
I can see how that would lead to tension.
And it has. There have been concerns about illegal migration, drug trafficking, and the spread of diseases. It's been a source of friction between the two countries.
So the Darien Gap creates a physical and political barrier between Panama and Colombia.
Right.
And what about Panama's border with Costa Rica? Has that also been a source of conflict?
Actually, yes. There was a brief but pretty intense border conflict between Panama and Costa Rica in 1921.
Really? I've never heard of this.
It's called the Coto War. It was a dispute over a small area along the border, the Coto Bruce Valley.
Wow, a war I've never even heard of. What was it about?
Basically, there were these long-standing disagreements about the exact location of the border going all the way back to the 19th century. Things escalated when a Panamanian police force occupied the disputed territory.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, Costa Rica responded by sending troops, and there were a number of skirmishes and casualties on both sides.
Wow. So how did this Coto War end?
Well, the United States stepped in to mediate.
Of course they did.
An American diplomat named Edward Dawson drew a new border demarcation which mostly favored Costa Rica.
And that's the border today.
It is.
So an American diplomat draws a line in the jungle, and that's that. It seems a bit arbitrary.
It does, doesn't it? But it really highlights how much influence the U.S. had in the region at the time.
Yeah, that's true. And even though the Coto War was relatively minor, it reminds us that border disputes, even small ones, can have a big impact on relations between countries.
For sure.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
I have.
We've seen how Panama, this small nation, situated at a crossroads of continents and oceans, has faced some incredible challenges and triumphs on its journey to self-determination.
Yeah, from Spanish colonization to the fight for independence, the building and eventual control of the Panama Canal, to the complexities of its relationships with its neighbors. It's been quite a journey.
Panama's story is one of resilience and ambition and a persistent desire for autonomy.
Definitely.
And I think it reminds us that even though geography plays a huge role in shaping a nation's destiny, it's ultimately the will of the people that determines their fate.
Well said.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Panama's past, do you have any final thoughts or questions for our listeners?
I think it's worth considering how Panama will navigate the increasing influence of China in the region.
That's an interesting thought.
China's investing a lot in infrastructure projects, particularly in ports and transportation, and that raises questions about where Panama's allegiances will lie in the future. Will they maintain their close ties with the United States, or will they be drawn closer to China?
That's a really compelling question. Panama's strategic location has always been a source of both opportunity and challenge, and it will definitely continue to shape its role in the world.
Well, to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the history of Panama. We hope you've learned something new and gained a deeper appreciation for this incredible country.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for watching episode 11 of Rise of a Nation. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like and subscribe for more. Write in the comments what country's rise you would like me to cover next.